Hey Nick,
Hey Liam.
do you hear about the entomologist who crashed his car?
No.
It was a beetle.
I like to think that he stopped because he saw a beetle rather than he was driving a beetle.
But then if he stopped, he would have just pulled over and he wouldn't have crashed.
But maybe it was like a super interesting beetle and crashing was the only way he could stop in time to see the beetle.
I nearly did that once. I saw a really interesting insect from my car in traffic, and I did contemplate like jumping out with the pot, but then the traffic started moving. So
When you say that, I imagine you just like leaping out of a moving vehicle, catching the beetle and running back into the car like some sort of Jason Statham film.
I mean, there have been moments when I've been likened to an action hero. Hello and welcome to EntoCast. And today I'm kind of excited because we've done some big groups of insects and we've done some smaller groups within some of the major groups. But I'm sure many of you are big fans of beetles, and I'm ashamed to say up until now we haven't really dedicated like a whole episode to beetles in general or a specific group of beetles. So I think it's about time. So good news that today, I'd like to say we shall be talking about one of the most charismatic groups of beetles, and perhaps a group that got many people interested in beetles in the first place, and that is of course the Longhorns.
We're really excited to have this, and we also have a really great interview coming up. So we spoke to Will Heany from the Longhorn Recording Scheme in the UK, and he's going to tell us all about his adventures with Longhorns and talk a little bit about recording schemes themselves. So we're going to join him now.
I'm William Heaney. I've managed the National Recording Scheme for Longhorn Beetles with Katie Potts, who's at the museum in London. She does something with African Coleoptera. I'm not completely sure what she does there. We've never even met, even. I basically got interested in beetles about 7 or 8 years ago with the chap who I started working with, John Lamin. He was really into his moths and was just getting into beetles, so it sort of got me into that way. Yada yada, long story short, went through to uni. I'm just finishing my master's now, and it was a few years ago that me and Katie were both approached to sort of run the recording scheme, which was quite novel as we'd not done anything like it whatsoever. So as a recording scheme, basically we just promote what we think are pretty much the most spectacular insects in Britain, if not the world, because everybody loves a longhorn beetle. We basically just take the records off people, help them identify them, and run about the country looking for them in weird and wonderful places with some weird and wonderful characters.
So that kind of leads on to my first question. I was going to say, why Longhorns in particular?
It was Platydema violacum that got me into the beetles. Firstly, it was extinct in Britain until a chap called Brian Sage found it in Norfolk in 2006, and then my friend John found it he read that article in 2007 or 6 and found that in the wood that our late boss owned. At the time, I was basically playing in punk bands and stuff when I was a kid. I had no interest in natural history whatsoever, and I was just getting into birds. And I remember John tapping the oak tree, and sort of these two purple beetles fell on, and John was sort of just so excited to see them, and I was like, "Oh, they're nice. Can you hear that nuthatch? You know what I mean? Like, they're just beetles." And then when I finally understood the significance of them, and then it was 3 years before I saw them again, but it was that Platydema that definitely got me into them. From that, I think we basically got asked to do the scheme, or I did certainly, because I'd started the Facebook group for Beetles, and that was starting to grow. I mean, I think we're approaching 2,500 members now. So we're one of the, we're not quite the hoverfly page, but we're getting there. So I think it was basically just, and I'm quite enthusiastic as well. When I want to do something, I will generally put everything into doing it for wrong or right reasons in some cases. But yeah, I think it was just general enthusiasm that got me into it. Longhorn sort of, once people start getting a few longhorn beetles recorded, or they've seen a few, they sort of hopefully start branching out into wider realms of beetles. potentially other insects as well. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. And how would you describe a longhorn beetle? What is it about a longhorn that makes it a longhorn? I think it kind of gives it away in the name, but if you could give us an idea, that would be cool.
I got asked this question at a workshop I ran a few weeks ago, and thankfully someone else was there to back me up because I was a bit lost. But generally, we sort of say that longhorns have got long antennae, but there are a few species in Britain that have really short antennae. They sort of share a few characteristics from the different groups. Mainly, the sort of difference between them is the second antennal segment is quite frequently longer than the first and the third one. And also their eyes are kidney shaped. Sometimes even they've got four eyes where the antennae split the eye in the middle. And that's just to accommodate them flicking backwards and forwards. Other than that, it's the tarsal formula, which is going to sound really bad, but I can't remember what it is. The back legs basically look like they've only got four tarsal segments, but there's actually five. There's one species, I think it is the Tanner beetle, but that might be wrong, where you can actually see all five segments really clearly. I'm going to frequently flick through the pictures of longhorn beetles now to make sure I did get that right. I should say as well, me and Katie don't profess to know everything about longhorns. It is primarily our sort of volunteer job is to take records and sort of confirm them, so to speak. So we are still really learning about them ourselves quite a bit as well.
Cool, and that's quite an interesting point there as well. So why are we doing recording schemes for longhorns? What's the point? What's the purpose behind recording these species?
Originally, it was just for distributional data. The guys that were setting these up wanted to know where these species were distributed around Britain or other countries if there's other things going on there. So originally it was just for that. We're seeing more and more now that the data's being used more for other things. So I'm potentially using the Longhorn data set for my master's dissertation, which is modelling distributions. It's also used in sort of planning and designating sites as well. A lot of longhorn beetles are quite rare and quite specific about their habits. And as everyone knows, there's predominantly they're deadwood feeders, so it's ancient woodland or woodland with some continuity, which supports the most amount. And it's, these woodlands can't be reversed once they're taken. So it's sort of, hopefully the records are designated or being helped towards designating sites. And I don't like to say planning things as well, but hopefully they are being used for that end as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. So has anyone done, do you know, like any studies with the distribution data? Is there anything interesting going on with the distribution of the longhorns?
We're seeing quite a few seem to be spreading more northward. Agapanthus veloso viridescens is probably I think it's longer than the beetle itself, even in the smallest font, the golden grey bloomed longhorn. We're seeing that one spreading slowly north, whereas maybe 10 years ago it was, around the below Lincolnshire sort of area, and now it's getting in as far as Yorkshire. I believe it's a bit more northern as well. There's a few other species as well, like Stictoleptura rubra, which seems to be spreading from Lincolnshire out both north and south gradually. The benefit as well with longhorns is you can frequently pick up a new beetle to Britain. Because they're imported a lot, there's the past few years there's been one or two that have been introduced, and been reported as new to Britain. So there is potential for people to actually find something new which hasn't been found here before. But the double-edged sword of that is that it could well be a pest species, something like the Asian longhorn beetle or something like that, which would be really detrimental to the forestry in Britain.
And do you pick up like invasives in your surveys as well?
We do, yeah. If because we have a Facebook group and a Twitter account, we are obliged to report any potential pests. So, I mean, frequently we get things like, I can't remember its actual name, but it lives in cork, the cork bark tree. So sometimes we get beetles come in and we get them posted earlier in the year, about March, April time, where people have found it looks a little bit like the wasp beetle and it's emerged in cork. I mean, there's no real threat to that in Britain as we don't grow cork trees. It's not a native species here. But other things, as I say, like the Asian longhorn beetle would be really bad if that got here.
interesting something you just said there about how you use the Facebook and Twitter to generate records. How do you kind of see the role of social media in recording schemes going forward?
Really good. I think it's nice and quick and it's easy. I look after the Twitter side of things, and Katie looks after the Facebook side of things. For other people that find a beetle quickly, they could generally, I believe, people will search in Facebook for Longhorn Beetle, and perhaps our group comes out up top. They join, they post a picture. Me and Katie can answer that pretty much straight away, and then ask them to upload the data as well to iRecord. Yeah, it's just really instant as well. You can give feedback to people and sharing their photos. It's sort of a bit of engagement with them, which I'd always like it. If I posted a picture and asked for help, it's always really nice when I was getting going that people would respond to it quickly and post the picture back with a little ID for you. Maybe giving you a few tips as to what it was that made it this species and not the separate one.
Yeah, I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there. It's that engagement, the two-way kind of nature on social media where you have someone who maybe just asking for some advice and then suddenly, generating data that we can actually use as scientists, like you said yourself, using some of this data for your master's project.
Yeah, definitely. Before people might have emailed or before that, written, I'd hate to have to deal in the ways of old where people were sending me record cards and things, and you'd have to sift through them and then perhaps write them a letter back. It was sort of like a full-time job, I'd imagine. I have typed some record cards up as well, actually, that were given to us by the previous recording scheme organizer, and it was hell on earth. It just took so long trying to read the writing, and then, this chap, I don't know if he's still with us, the records I was doing, but I thought, he sent me this lovely 2-page letter that's not been read for maybe 20 years. Do I respond to him and say thanks, or do I try and track him down? What do I do?
So, do you think recording schemes are kind of like modernising in this way? And do you see kind of more long-term engagement with the people who maybe did have that passing interest to come in the first place? Are you seeing these people coming back a second, third, 10th time to then generating more data?
Yeah, definitely. Me and my friend Rowan a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, started the Beetle page on Facebook, and that was purely because we couldn't go to a museum all the time. I lived in Lincolnshire, and Rowan lived in the middle of Derbyshire. There's no museums near us, so we started it as to be able to put our pictures on there, and a few friends that we knew would get involved and tell us what it was. The page sort of grew, and from that, I won't name drop any names, but there's definitely there's been a handful of people that I remember them posting the first few pictures and sort of, what's this? Oh, it's a 7-spot ladybird, or what's this? Oh, Pterosticus malleus, or, common ground beetle or ladybird. And now I think one or two of them are actually moderators on the group. So on that front, it's definitely worked. I think on the Longhorn Beetle one, if that can repeat as well, that'd be excellent.
So if people do want to find out more about obviously they've got the Facebook and the Twitter as one aspect. Are there any other really good resources or training that you can point people towards?
It's funny you should say that. There is. We've just done an FSC guide for Longhorn Beetles, which is I haven't actually read it back over myself and kind of found any mistakes, but the pictures look really pretty, and I have actually used it myself when my mind went blank the other day out. So there is an FSC fold-out chart that's really cheap going, and that pretty much covers nearly all the species that you're going to find. Sadly, other than that, it's a bit of a jump between. There was an old British wildlife publication from 2007, which I don't know if anybody's still got kicking around. They can find in there's a printout. It was a 2-issue edition, and you had all of the Longhorn beetles that were featured in Britain, and they were drawn up, and there was a bit of description in there. I think that might be out of print. The only other way you can go then is there's a Beetles of Britain and Ireland, but the books are about £100 each. So I mean, it depends. If you're really into beetles, it's worth buying because it does have other groups in there. But if you're just sort of starting out, I would go with the FSC chart, and then just post any pictures on the Facebook or the Twitter group, and we can confirm them that way and sort of give you any further advice.
I definitely vouch for the FSC guide as well. It's absolutely lovely. So if any of the listeners don't have it, this is my recommendation.
I was just wondering as well, like, considering people getting involved, where's the best place to find longhorns? You mentioned ancient woodlands, but where are good places for people to go to find them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose we should start at the start of the year for hopefully next year. But I mean, hawthorn straight away, as soon as the hawthorn starts flowering, you just need a white umbrella or some sort of beating tray device. And you just hold the umbrella underneath the hawthorn, give it a few gentle taps with a stick or shake it, and generally you'll find Scrumoptera ruficornis and the wasp beetle. And then once the hawthorn finishes, you just go straight to hogweed. Most of my evenings now, or even on my lunch half hour, I'll just go and just walk down a public footpath and look. What you want really is a nice, sunny, sheltered hogweed sort of patch. Woodland rides are good, or around the edge of woods. But generally, I mean, once you've tapped hawthorn and you've looked about on the hogweed, the only other real sort of time you're going to find longhorns is pure luck. You might just be walking along and one will land on you, or you'll see something fly. But when I was walking through Southall last year, just on the way up to the uni pub at about 7:30, at somewhere at this time of year, perhaps, I was just ambling through and I saw a beetle flying and knew it was a beetle. So I ran after it, and straight on the tree in front of me, just on a line, was Pymatodes testaceus, which was like, wow. Sadly, it climbed too far up, so I couldn't get a pot on it, or I just managed to get a really bad phone photo. But sometimes it's luck. Or dead wood stacks in forestry operations where they just stack it all up on the side of the road. I won't suggest climbing all over it. Read the signs; it does say don't to. But sometimes you have to climb about, and you might see one or two of them sort of sitting, just sunning themselves.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with longhorns is you just described loads of absolutely lovely habitats where it's just nice, even if you don't see any, just to spend some time looking at flowers. So, something I've got to ask you really. I hope you don't mind. Do you have a favourite longhorn beetle?
Oh, of course, yeah, Agapanthia veloso viridescens. I think. I like to say it's my favourite one that I've seen. I don't know why. It's the zebra-coloured antennae, I think. And once you see them thrashing them back and forth, if you pick one up between your finger and thumb and they're doing that and put it to your ear, you can hear them squeaking, where they're just rubbing the nose against the wing cases. I think that's where they're rubbing. And as far as a longhorn beetle I haven't seen, I think it'd either be the ladder-marked Saperda scalaris, or it's really dull looking. It's just brown, but Lamia texta, the weaver beetle, which is only found in one place in the Cam Washes. That's basically, I'm going to be camping out there for about a month straight this year, just so I can hopefully see it. But one turns up every 10, 15 years. They're not they're not recorded at all often. Big bruiser thing, it's got to be. It's the size of your thumb. It's big.
You were talking as well about finding longhorns, like in hawthorn and flowers and things like that. Do they play a role in the ecosystem? You said the wood borers, but do they also pollinate as well?
Yeah, I mean, the flower feeders will certainly be pollinating. Often, when you do find a longhorn on flower, the face is covered in it. They're often really dusty. There's a few of them that don't feed feed within wood. Agapanthia and also Phytosia both feed in hogweed and thistles. But I mean, they'll play part in food webs. Feeding for other things. And also decomposition is basically the main one that they play the role in, just decomposing the wood and the plant material and things.
So yeah, I guess that kind of the wood is locked away. A lot of the nutrients are not going to be broken down until some saproxylic organism can do it. So yeah, the beetles there are munching away on an awful lot as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, some of these beetles, when they come out, they're big things. They've been chewing in there. Been in there 2 or 3 years as well. That'll have gnawed through a fair amount of wood.
I mean, there is any particular species that you would encourage listeners to go out and have a look for, or any potential new invaders that we should be watching out for?
There's just the Asian longhorn beetle. That's the one that people are really worried about. It was found once in 2012 in Kent and thankfully eradicated. But I mean, people should always keep a lookout for that. Hopefully the ports are doing the jobs and these things aren't coming in. The beetle I'd get people going out to look for, I suppose, for Rutpella maculata, I think it's called the black and yellow longhorn beetle is a common name. It's our logo for our scheme. I mean, that one's a great one to find because it should be quite abundant and it's relatively widespread as well. Other than that, I mean, any longhorns, although some of them are common, like the wasp beetle and Rutpella, they're still fantastic to find. So any longhorn, find any of them, record them all and send us all the records, basically.
I mean, it's interesting you say Propeller as well, because it's always considered one of these very common ones you see sitting on bracken and stuff in the summer. But I found recently is there colour variation? Is that right, between different parts of the UK?
There's absolutely loads of them. I did try and do it as an undergrad project where I was going to really naively photo match all of I think I managed to get together about 3,000 photos of Propeller through iRecord and also iSpot. And I matched them to, basically I got to about 77 variants. And I was having to make a lot of these names up. I was naming like Propeller Maculata, Batman Eye, because it looked like a Batman on the back, just so I could remember what the names were. And eventually I sort of just gave up with it because I did a little bit of mapping, and there might be some subtle variation in counties, or, there might be slightly more yellow ones in some areas and slightly more black ones in other areas. But I was I think the general thought was that it was altitude or mountainous regions where they were more blacker. But then the chap, John, who I mentioned earlier, he sort of sent me a picture of a really black one mating with a really yellow one. So that sort of put that to play. I think it's probably thermophilic sort of behaviour, where the blacker it is, perhaps it's been in a colder area, so it's trying to absorb more heat as a larvae, or I'm not too sure really. I think you'd have to breed them on, but there's certainly, I mean, it's another reason why to look for it, because you can find all yellow ones, you can find all black ones. There's 101 different sort of spots and stripes and things that you can find on them.
Oh, cool, interesting stuff. So if people are interested, you say you can follow the Longhorn Recording Scheme on Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah, on Facebook, you should be able to find us just through Longhorn Beetle Recording Scheme. On Twitter, we're at NLonghornRS. There's myself and Katie on Twitter as well, although I don't think Katie uses it. And then there's also our email address, which is longhorns@brc.ac.uk, and we'll answer any queries that way as well.
Excellent. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Not a problem. It's been great.
So it was really great to talk to Will there. He was really interesting, and he had some quite cool stories about Longhorns. I particularly thought it was funny when he was talking about running down the street trying to chase after an interesting beetle. That's such an entomologist thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel now as well, like, Longhorns are something that I've always kind of been partly aware of because they're so big and charismatic and cool, and like when you see one out, it's always exciting. But now I've just kind of been thinking about them. I'm just really keen to get out there and to see if I can see some more species.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Will was giving us some good tips there. Find some wood piles and things, see if you can find them. And also he talked about some of the different values of trying to find these things as well. And one of the things that I really picked up on was him talking about the Asian longhorn beetle. I think that's something that really shows the value of these sort of recording schemes. I think we keep coming back to this when we talk about recording schemes, talking about invasives and things, but it is an important thing. And the Asian longhorn beetle can be pretty devastating in the US and Canada, where it's been invasive. It's destroyed a lot of trees because it just has its larva just will destroy pretty much most broad-leaved trees, and there's just nothing really to stop it because it's invasive. There's no natural predators or anything, so it just runs absolutely rampant.
Yeah, it's a really nice case study actually as a longhorn beetle, because most people's professional experience with longhorns, I'm thinking about, forestry and people involved with that kind of thing, and for certain species as well, structural, but more limited. It is mainly forestry, but they're kind of, you say longhorn to a forester and they're instantly thinking, they're eating my trees, and it's these big pests. And more we're seeing that actually these aren't natives, they are introduced species. And also, interestingly, sometimes it's also introduced species on introduced species of tree, but I guess that's a whole nother kettle.
Yeah, if you have an introduced tree that has become naturalised in an environment, is it then an invasive if it's on that tree?
Well, I think it's more like actual plantations of these trees.
Oh, I see.
Where because it's commercial value or whatever, they're planting and growing a lot of these trees. So it's like, well, should we care? Because that's just a crop. But then if you think about the economics of them, obviously, yeah, that is a big issue. But in terms of biodiversity and conservation, then does it really matter if they're being attacked?
Yeah, and I think with the Asian longhorn, it's particularly dramatic as well, because I didn't realise this, but there was an outbreak in Kent in 2012 in the UK of Asian longhorn, and they had to essentially close off from any sort of exports, imports, and have like a controlled area for like kilometers round where they found this outbreak, and they felled thousands of trees trying to control it, because the longhorn beetles, the Asian longhorn, can fly around 2 kilometers, so it could spread very, very quickly if it so wished to. But I think it was also a good case in showing that if you do find them quickly, they can be controlled because they have a long life cycle, because they spend a long time as eggs and larvae. If you catch them before they're adults and they can disperse, then you can get rid of them. And because they live in trees, you can fell the trees and control them. And in places like, I think it was in Ontario in Canada, they've had really successful control of this species.
And again, that just straight away points to our most effective way with dealing with this type of invasive is early detection, which absolutely recording schemes are going to be probably the first port of call to find these invasives.
No, exactly. I think it really shows the value of these recording schemes. And that was something else that Will was talking about as well. Like, there's a lot of data out there. And a lot of it needs verifying, a lot of it needs processing. We need people who are interested in this stuff and are willing to give a bit of time to do it, because it is very valuable.
And I'm constantly surprised as well by how many groups of insects at the moment just aren't getting verified, just because there is no one like kind of looking at them.
And I guess that's because a lot of it is voluntary and it's just sort of interest-based. So you need to find someone who, one, knows about the scheme, two, is interested in that insect, and also is willing to do it for free as well. So it's quite a few difficult criteria to fit together. And thankfully we do have people like Will who are just willing to do these sort of things out of interest. But if anyone's interested in any obscure species and you want to get involved with a recording scheme, I'm sure they'll be happy to take you on.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Longhorns are a very interesting group. We said very charismatic, obviously very large. I mean, listeners may remember back to our very first episode where we talked about some of the largest insects in the world, and one of the ones we spoke about was the Titan beetle, which is one of these Cerambycidae, these longhorns. So, perhaps something we should have started with, just to clear up exactly what we mean when we talk about longhorns. We said some of the characteristics, so they tend to have long antennae, they have certain configuration of tarsi on the segments. There's also tend to be kind of large and bright coloured. But yeah, we're referring to beetles here in the family Cerambycidae. And I was looking into this because it's quite interesting about why they're called Cerambycidae. And apparently, I can't write whether this is absolutely true, but a lot of these kind of myths and legends, it doesn't really matter because they're actually quite interesting. But I was finding that the reason they're called Cerambycidae is because they're named after a character from Greek mythology.
Okay. Who is this character? Is he Mr. Cerambycidae?
Close, he's Mr. Cerumbus. So the story goes that this dude was a herder, and he was a very, very good singer, and I think he played instruments or, some kind of musical thing. And he was very arrogant with this, and he would boast a lot. And so for this, he was always falling out with gods and other nymphs. I think actually he was supposed to be like the grandson of Poseidon or something. So, he had some godlike blood in him, I'm sure. But anyway, in the story, he ends up having a bit of an argument with some nymphs, which is never a good move.
No.
And he told some nasty stories about them. And they didn't take kindly to this. So they came, and as punishment, they transformed him into a large wood-gnawing beetle with horns.
Oh.
So straight away we're thinking a large beetle with horns, which long antenna, and wood boring. Yeah, this sounds like a longhorn beetle. And we think it's probably the Greeks were referring here to beetles in the Cerambyx genus, because they've classically fit that description. So when it came to naming the family of these beetles, that's where Cerambycidae came from, in kind of reference to this character in Greek mythology, which I really like. I think that's
a really cool story, and like you said, I don't think it really matters how true it is either, because it's just a cool story. And I would be surprised if it wasn't true, because it sounds like it fits so well. Yeah. If it was on Wikipedia, it's true. Yeah, and there are a lot of interesting longhorns out there as well. Like we said, one of the largest species in the world, Titanus, is a longhorn beetle. But There were lots of others out there as well, and I was looking at one that I found very cool called Macrodontia cervicornis, and this is a longhorn that occurs in the Amazon. And I liked it because it looks cool. I'll put a picture in the description. And it's also got massive jaws, which make it look really vicious, which is always just fun. And I think as well, the thing that really struck me about it is it has these incredible, huge larvae. So its larvae reach up to 21 centimetres in length.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're incredibly big, and they're very easy to spot when they're being on a tree because they have these enormous holes that come out of the tree where the larvae have been boring. And I just thought that these guys were really awesome. Did you find any other interesting longhorns?
Oh, loads and loads. So one of the ones that I always think of when I think of longhorn beetles is the harlequin beetle. This goes back to one I saw when I was out in Trinidad, and it's just because it's such a crazy cool beetle. Just first of all, just by the colours, it's got these really bright, vivid lines and specks and stripes on it. Which I think where it gets its common name from. But also because on the males they have these incredibly long front legs, like almost longer than the body and kind of almost getting off the length of the antenna. And I believe these are primarily used to actually hold on to the female. Which is why they have this massive sexual dimorphism. But yeah, definitely check out a picture in the show notes. Really funky looking beetle.
I think, like we've said, a lot of longhorns are very charismatic in a way because they are so large and they are so vivid in the different colours. So if you are interested into getting into entomology in a way, longhorns is probably a good route to start with.
A gateway drug, yeah.
Yeah, gateway drug. A gateway drug to Coleoptera.
And there's also some really cool examples of things. So we talked a bit about already different colour morphs, and there's some really good examples in the rock peddler and that. Something else, camouflage. Many longhorn species, the adults in particular, very cryptic. There tend to be lots of brown ones and ones which really blend into the wood, which is the host plant which they've emerged from, which makes total sense. But even warning colours, there's examples. One of the well-known one from North America is the wed milkweed beetle, Tetraopes tetraflamus. I might have to say that a couple of times. And this is one of the species which feeds on milkweed, which is of course full of toxins, and this beetle is actually able to then incorporate some of these toxins into its body as defense, and then has this bright red kind of warning pattern to say, hey, I'm toxic, stay away from me. And taken even further, then we even have like mimicry in some of these beetles, and again that's something we've already mentioned in the interview with Will, with one of my favourites, the wasp beetles, Clytus aretus, which is very, very wasp looking when you see them out sat there. The first time you see them, like you said, it's a bit of a double take. It's like, what a bizarre looking wasp. Oh, whoa, it's a beetle. Okay, so yeah, I think that's all we've got time for on this episode, but thanks for joining us, and we hope that we've opened your eyes up to the wonderful world of longhorn beetles. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Royal Entomological Society.
As always, you can contact us at entocast@gmail.com. You can also get us on Twitter @entocast, and we're on various different social medias around. Just Google Entocast and things will come up. But yeah, all that leaves us to say is thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a new love of longhorns.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.